Why was the fire louder than the gunfire? She couldn't tell anymore. The world had collapsed into smoke, into screams, into a strange, suffocating silence that came in waves between explosions. Somewhere in that haze, men she called brothers were still breathing, or maybe not. She didn't stop to check. She couldn't afford to. Her boots crunched over glass, her gloved hands shaking as she pressed them against a bleeding chest. He was heavy, too heavy, and yet she pulled. The smell of jet fuel mixed with burning canvas, ash clinging to her skin. The flames rose higher against the fractured night sky. She thought she'd seen hell before, on training grounds, in desert firefights, in the villages where no one smiled at them. But this was different. This time, she was inside the inferno. She dragged the soldier across broken concrete, her breath catching, heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her shoulders screamed with every pull, an old injury never healed right. The sound of his groaning kept her alive, kept her moving, step by step, away from the twisted wreckage. But then the groaning stopped. She froze, looked down at his face. Soot streaked across his cheeks, his eyes half open but unfocused. She pressed 2 fingers against his neck, a beat, faint but there. Relief washed through her chest, not yet gone, not on her watch. Her throat burned from the smoke. She spat black into the dirt. And then another sound, a voice, weak, calling her name. Sarah. She turned. Through the haze another shape moved, a silhouette on hands and knees crawling toward her. His gear was gone, his helmet shattered. She recognized him instantly. Danny, the youngest in their unit. The one who joked about going home and opening a food truck because war was bad for digestion. His face was pale, lips trembling, eyes wide in terror. "Stay there," she shouted, her voice cracking. "Don't move." But he didn't listen. He crawled faster, coughing blood, dragging a useless leg behind him. She wanted to drop everything, to run and grab him, but the man under her hand still breathed, still needed her. And in war, every second was a choice, one life or another. Her vision blurred, not from smoke, though the smoke was everywhere, clinging to her lashes, her lungs, but from the weight of it all. "How do you choose who to carry?" She didn't answer, she just acted. She shoved her wounded brother's rifle across her back, gripped his vest tighter and pulled again, every muscle in her body screaming, until the shadows of half-collapsed walls swallowed them. Somewhere safe, safer at least. She laid him down against the rubble, her breath coming in sharp gasps, ears ringing from the nearness of the blast. She turned back toward Danny. He was still moving, barely. Her legs willed her forward, stumbling, sprinting, choking. She reached him, dropped to her knees, lifted his head into her lap. His eyes flickered open, staring at her with a kind of disbelief. "You came back." She almost laughed, almost broke. "Of course I did." Blood spilled from his mouth as he tried to smile. His hand reached up, trembling, gripping her wrist with what little strength he had. She wanted to tell him he'd be fine, that the medevac was coming, that help was minutes away. But she couldn't, because she didn't know if it was true. The fire snapped behind her, close enough to feel the heat searing her back. Somewhere out in the distance, gunfire cracked again. Sporadic, disoriented. The kind that meant her unit was no longer a unit, just fragments scattered, fighting to survive. Danny coughed, eyes rolling back. "Stay with me," she whispered, slapping his cheek gently. "Don't you dare leave." Her voice broke on the last word. She thought of his food truck, of the way he'd once spent hours debating whether a burrito could solve war if everyone just sat down to eat together, of the way he'd looked at her during training when she had outshot every single man on the range, half admiring, half terrified. "Not like this," she murmured, rocking him slightly, as if rocking him could keep him tethered to life. "Not here." But war never cared about fairness. A sharp whine cut the air above them. She recognized the sound instantly. Incoming. Her body moved before her mind did. She grabbed Danny, threw herself over him, pressing his head to her chest as the explosion tore the night apart. The blast wave lifted her, slammed her back down, knocked the air from her lungs. Dust rained down. For a moment she thought the fire had finally taken her too. Silence followed, deafening. Her ears rang, her vision spun, but her arms were still locked around him. She forced herself to move to check his face again. Still breathing. Her body ached everywhere, her hands shook violently, but she smiled through the blood on her lips. "You're not done yet," she whispered, more to herself than him. In that moment she realized something. This wasn't about orders, wasn't about the flag stitched on their sleeves, wasn't even about the mission anymore. This was about them, about carrying them. And so she moved again, through smoke, through fire, carrying her brothers one by one until her spirit burned brighter than the flames. But she never told them, not yet, why she refused to leave anyone behind, why she chose to bleed for every single one of them, even when they would have called her reckless. That truth, that reason, it was buried deeper than any wound. And someday, when the smoke cleared, maybe she'd finally speak it aloud. Why did they never see her coming? It wasn't her rifle or her precision, or even the way she could disappear into a battlefield like smoke into the wind. No, it was her silence. The kind of silence that unnerved the loud ones. The kind that made commanders hesitate, unsure if she was fearless or simply broken. At the briefing table she'd sat apart, eyes forward, saying little. The others joked, traded stories, tried to loosen the knots of fear in their stomachs. She only listened. When the map was rolled out, the operation laid bare with red circles and arrows, she felt the old ache tighten in her chest, the kind of ache that wasn't physical, the kind that reminded her why she was here at all. But she didn't tell them that. Not then. Not ever. One of the men, Marlowe, the oldest of them, a man whose face carried more scars than smiles, had leaned toward her. "You good, Vasquez?" She nodded, just nodded, and he'd left it at that, because words weren't her weapon, not outside the trigger pull, not outside the fire. The mission was supposed to be simple. In, secure the compound, extract intelligence, out before dawn. They'd run versions of it 100 times, but every soldier knows simple is the deadliest word in war. She remembered stepping out of the transport, boots hitting foreign soil. The air was cold, dry, thinner than home. The moon hung low, clouded by dust, painting everything in shades of gray. They moved in formation, shadows among shadows, the silence punctuated only by gear shifting against fabric, the quiet clicks of safeties off. She felt it then, the weight in her gut, that tugging instinct, the same one that had saved her life more times than luck ever could. But when she glanced at the others, they didn't feel it. They were laughing under their breath, teasing Danny about his food truck again, mocking his terrible handwriting on the mission roster. She almost smiled at that. Almost. And then, somewhere behind the laughter, she thought she heard it. A metallic scrape. So faint she might have imagined it. But her hand went to her rifle anyway, her body tightening, her breath slowing. She scanned the rooftops, the windows, the empty alleys. Nothing. Just silence again. She should have spoken then, should have said something's wrong. But silence was her curse, as much as it was her gift. And within minutes, the trap was sprung. Explosions lit the night, fire rolling through the compound, screams cutting across the comms. Their simple mission had dissolved into chaos, each man separated, each voice a broken shard of what used to be a unit. She remembered the shockwave, the searing light, the wall that collapsed inches from her. She remembered clawing through smoke, pulling bodies she barely recognized. She remembered the choice. And that's where she'd been when the fire swallowed her, carrying one, then another, until her body nearly gave out. Until Danny's broken whisper had snapped her back into motion. Until survival wasn't just about living. It was about refusing to let anyone die alone. But what she never told them, what no one in the unit ever knew, was that this wasn't the first time she'd carried her brothers through smoke. Years before, she'd done it once already. Different war, different fire. This one wasn't born of bullets and airstrikes. It was born of a home that had collapsed under its own weight, a house fire in the middle of the night, two younger brothers trapped inside. She'd been just a teenager, barefoot on the street, lungs burning as she ran back into the flames. She saved one, dragged him out by his arm, coughing, crying, terrified. But the other. Her voice caught whenever memory reached that place. That was the night she learned silence. Not the silence of discipline or training or fear, but the silence of blame. Because when the flames died and the ashes cooled, no one said it aloud, but she felt it. The weight, the eyes, the whisper that she had chosen wrong. And so she swore in that quiet, in that unspoken grief, that never again would she leave one behind. It wasn't a soldier's vow, not then, not yet. It was a sister, a broken girl's promise to the ghost of a brother she couldn't carry. That was why she was here, in this fire, in this war. That was why she refused to stop. The men around her didn't know this. They only saw her as relentless, reckless, too stubborn for her own good. But in truth, she wasn't carrying soldiers tonight. She was carrying ghosts. When Danny stirred again, coughing against her chest, she tightened her grip. "You'll make it," she whispered, not for him, but for herself, for the memory that still haunted her. Somewhere across the compound, gunfire erupted again. She stiffened, pressing Danny flat against the dirt. Shadows moved in the smoke, foreign voices echoing. She could feel their boots hitting the ground, too close, too heavy. Enemy patrols sweeping the wreckage. Her heart pounded in her ears. If they found her here with two wounded men and no backup, it would be over. She scanned the ground, debris, rubble, shards of glass, and then there, a half-collapsed doorway, shelter if she could just reach it. She forced Danny's arm over her shoulders, staggering under his weight, whispering encouragement like a mantra. "One step, just one, come on." He groaned, half-conscious but moved. Behind them the voices grew louder. A flashlight beam cut through the smoke, passing within inches of her. She froze, pressing Danny against the wall, holding her breath until her lungs screamed. The beam moved on. Her chest loosened. She pulled him again, step by step, until they collapsed under the broken doorway, hidden in shadow. Her body shook uncontrollably now, adrenaline fatting, exhaustion catching up. But she refused to close her eyes. Not yet. Somewhere out there the others were still alive. Maybe. Scattered, bleeding, calling out on comms that no longer worked. She thought of Marlowe, steady as stone. Of Jace, who had left behind a daughter he'd never met. Of Carter, who always carried a deck of cards, swearing he could read the future in them. Were they gone? Were they waiting for her? She didn't know. And that not knowing ate at her more than the smoke, more than the pain. Danny stirred again, eyes half-lidded, blood staining his collar. Why do you keep doing this?" His voice was raw, barely a whisper. "You could have run." She looked at him, unable to answer. Not because she didn't know, but because the words were too heavy, because the truth was buried in fire and ashes from long ago. Instead, she squeezed his hand. And in that silence, he seemed to understand. Outside, the footsteps faded, the fire crackled, the night closed in. And somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath the smoke, beneath the weight of all she carried, a vow echoed. Not one more brother lost. Not tonight. Not ever again. How long could silence protect them? She counted breaths. Hers, Danny, the wounded man slumped beside her. Each inhale was a risk, each exhale a prayer. The fire outside had dulled to embers, but danger hadn't faded, it had only shifted. Now it came in the rhythm of footsteps, the hushed foreign commands echoing through the ruins, the metallic clicks of rifles searching the dark. Her fingers clenched around her weapon, not tight enough to fire, just tight enough to remind herself she still could. Danny stirred again, whispering her name. She hushed him with a hand, eyes locked on the faint glow of a flashlight sweeping past the collapsed doorway. If they were found, there would be no fight, only an ending. Her heartbeat thudded like a drum. And then voices closer. Words she didn't understand, but tone was universal. Searching, hunting. She remembered training, stay still, stay small, stay silent. But training never taught her what to do when the silence wasn't just tactical, it was survival for the people you loved. She shifted her body, pressing against Danny, covering him as best she could, even as her own lungs screamed for air. The light passed again, slower this time. Too slow. She closed her eyes, waiting for the shout, the muzzle flash, the collapse of everything she was trying to hold together. But then a gunshot, distant, a man's scream. The voices outside erupted into chaos, half running toward the sound. Someone else was alive. Someone else was fighting. Her pulse leapt. She wanted to move, to find them, to regroup, but she couldn't. Not with Danny half-conscious and the other soldier barely breathing. Her instincts wrenched against her bones, telling her to run toward the sound of her brothers. But her vow kept her pinned. Not one left behind. Time stretched, minutes or maybe hours bleeding together. Finally, when the night dulled and the enemy's voices faded into the far corners of the compound, she let herself breathe fully again. She turned to Danny. His skin was clammy, his lips pale. She checked his wound, pressing fabric tighter, trying to slow the bleeding. Her hands shook, not from fear, from fury, at herself, at the mission, at the fire that had once again forced her into the same impossible corner. How many times would she be asked to choose who lived and who died? The memory clawed back unbidden, the night of the house fire. Her brother's face swallowed in smoke she couldn't fight. The silence after, when her family looked at her as though she'd abandoned him. She hadn't. She knew she hadn't, but still, she had carried one, not the other. And that silence had never left. Danny's hand twitched in hers, grounding her back to the present. He whispered something she barely caught. "What? Don't carry me if it slows you." Her throat tightened. She almost snapped at him, almost shouted. Instead, her words came out like gravel. "Don't say that again." He tried to smile, but the effort was too much. His head lolled back against the rubble, breath shallow. She brushed soot from his forehead, fingers lingering longer than they should. Her calm crackled suddenly, static, then a voice. "Low, Vasquez, anyone." Her chest seized. She grabbed the radio, pressing it close. "Marlo, I hear you." Thank God, relief bled through his tone. "Status." She looked at the broken bodies beside her, at her own shaking hands. Her lungs burned from the smoke, her legs screamed with fatigue. But she said only, "I've got two, alive, barely. Where are you?" "North end, about 50 meters from the collapsed wall. Carter, with me. Jace didn't make it." Her jaw clenched. She closed her eyes for half a beat, letting the loss stab through her, then bury itself in the vault where all the other names were kept. She opened them again, steady. "We'll move to you." "No, stay put," Marlo barked. "Too hot, we'll come." She knew the tone, knew the edge of command in his voice, but she also knew the terrain, knew the patrols, knew the odds. "You won't make it," she said quietly. "Not both of you." The silence on the line told her he knew she was right. Her mind raced. Every option was fire, every choice burned. Finally, she whispered into the calm, "Give me 10 minutes, then move." "Vasquez." She clicked off before he could argue. Her eyes swept the ground, searching. A path through rubble, a way to shift these broken bodies without drawing attention. Her muscles protested, but she forced herself to stand, rolling her shoulders, feeling the weight settle again. She pulled Danny up first, slinging his arm around her. He groaned, teeth gritted, but he moved. The other soldier, unconscious, she dragged by the vest. Each step felt like drowning in mud, every breath scraping raw through her throat. But she moved, through smoke, through silence. Halfway to cover, Danny's voice broke the quiet again, weak, fractured. Why you, Sarah? Why always you? She didn't answer, couldn't, not yet. Because the truth wasn't about war, or missions, or loyalty. It was about a brother she couldn't carry. And until every one of them was safe, she would never let herself say it aloud. The night shifted again, shouts rising, gunfire closer. She quickened her pace, dragging, pulling, heart hammering. And then through the haze she saw them, Marlowe's broad frame. Carter crouched beside him, rifle raised, their silhouettes like ghosts at the edge of survival. Relief nearly buckled her knees, but she forced herself to stand taller, to carry her brothers forward, step by step. When they reached her, Marlowe's eyes widened at the sight of the two wounded, at the sight of her, smoke-streaked, bleeding, shaking, but unbroken. "Jesus Vasquez," he muttered, grabbing the unconscious soldier from her. "How the hell did you?" She cut him off with a glance. No words, just silence. And in that silence, Marlowe understood. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What do you do when survival demands you move forward, but your brothers can barely stand? That was the question burning in the silence between them. The four of them crouched beneath the broken wall, smoke curling above like the sky itself was burning. Marlowe had the unconscious soldier propped against the stone, checking his pulse. Carter kept his rifle trained on the shadows, eyes wide, jaw tight. Danny lay slumped against her, every breath a struggle. No one spoke at first. Maybe none of them knew how. Finally, Marlowe broke it. "Bird's gone." His voice was steady, too steady. Extraction window closed when the compound lit up. No reinforcements. The words hit like cold iron. She'd known it deep down, but hearing it stripped the last scraps of denial away. They were alone. Carter spat into the dirt, shaking his head. "So what? We sit here and wait to die." Marlowe didn't flinch. "No, we move. Find cover, maybe link up with second squad if they're still out there." "If," Carter muttered, "big if." Danny coughed, a wet, rattling sound. She pulled him closer, whispering something she wasn't even sure he heard. Her hands were stained with his blood now, the metallic scent clinging to her skin. Marlowe's eyes flicked to her, not asking, demanding, "What's your call, Vasquez?" She hated it, hated when they did that, looked at her as though she carried the answer stitched into her silence. She wasn't the ranking officer. She wasn't supposed to decide. But in moments like this, they waited anyway. She looked at Danny, looked at the unconscious man, looked at the fire chewing the sky. "Moving, the only way," she said finally, voice low. Carter snapped. "We can't carry them both and fight, you know it. We'll get pinned, all of us." The truth in his words stung. Her shoulders throbbed from dragging bodies, her knees buckled with every shift of Danny's weight. Marlowe's arms trembled too, though he tried to hide it. And Carter's eyes were rimmed with fear, his breath shallow. For a moment the silence felt like betrayal, because maybe Carter was right. Maybe carrying everyone meant losing everyone. But she wouldn't speak it. Instead, she met his eyes steady. "We carry them." Carter's jaw tightened. Anger flashed there, but behind it something else, something closer to grief. He muttered, "You don't know what it's like to." He stopped himself, shook his head, turned away. But she did know. She knew what it was like to lose one because you couldn't carry both. She knew it so well it lived in her bones, in every breath, in every nightmare. She didn't tell him that. She never did. They moved. The night pressed down heavier now, stars blotted by smoke. Every alley was a risk, every rooftop a silent rifle waiting to open fire. Marlowe took point, his bulk moving with surprising quiet. She stayed in the middle, Danny's weight sagging against her. Carter brought up the rear, eyes flicking back and forth, fingers twitching on the trigger. Each step was agony. Her shoulders screamed, her ribs ached with every inhale. She forced her body forward anyway, focusing only on the rhythm. One step, then another. Danny stirred once, mumbling nonsense. A childhood memory, maybe, something about fishing with his father. She hushed him gently, her throat tightening. She wanted to keep him awake, keep him tethered, but she didn't have the heart to shake him. He needed rest. He needed hope. They reached an abandoned outpost near the far wall of the compound. A shell of a building, roof half collapsed, windows shattered. But it was cover. Inside they laid the wounded down. Carter paced like a caged animal. Marlowe checked ammo, his hands steady but his eyes shadowed. She sat against the wall, Danny's head in her lap again. She brushed soot from his brow, her fingers moving almost automatically. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then Carter spoke. "I had a brother too." She looked up. He wasn't facing her. His eyes were on the broken window, scanning the night. But his voice had changed, lower, frayed at the edges. 6 years older, he joined the Marines first. Told me I wasn't cut out for it, said I was too soft. A bitter laugh. Guess I wanted to prove him wrong. He didn't make it past his first tour. I never even got to see him come home. The words lingered. Carter's jaw worked, but he said nothing more. She swallowed hard, wanted to speak, to tell him she understood, that she knew what it was like to carry the weight of a brother's absence. But the words stayed locked inside where they'd always been. Instead, she reached over, placed a hand briefly on his arm, just enough, just silent. And in that silence, Carter exhaled, slow, shaking. Marlowe finally broke the quiet. "We'll need to move again at first light. Terrain's easier in daylight, less chance of walking blind into crossfire." Daylight, the word sounded almost foreign now, as if the sun belonged to another world, a world far from theirs. She looked down at Danny. His chest rose and fell, faint but steady. She whispered, so soft it was almost only for herself, "You'll see it. I'll get you there." The hours stretched, heavy with fatigue. Her body wanted sleep, but her mind refused. Every sound outside made her flinch. Every gust of wind through broken glass felt like a whisper of danger. And beneath it all, memory clawed at her again. The fire. The night she carried one brother, lost the other. The silence that followed. She pressed her eyes shut, her throat tight. She couldn't let it happen again. Not here, not now. When dawn finally bled across the horizon, painting the smoke in shades of gold and gray, she shifted Danny carefully, preparing to move. Her muscles screamed in protest, but she forced them into obedience. Marlowe checked his rifle. Carter adjusted his gear. Both looked to her again, waiting. She hated it. Hated being the one they watched when decisions cut too deep. But she lifted Danny anyway, bracing his weight, standing taller than she felt. "We move," she said simply. No debate this time, no hesitation. They followed. Out into the smoke, out into the fire-scorched morning. Carrying their brothers. And somewhere deep inside, though none of them would say it aloud, they knew, if anyone could carry them through, it was her. Because her spirit burned brighter than the flames. Why was she standing so still, when the world behind her was burning? The others moved in frantic bursts, dragging wounded, shouting into radios, coughing through smoke. But she was frozen. Not in fear, not in shock, in something deeper, like she was holding back a dam inside herself. The air was acrid. Flames licked the edge of what had once been their shelter. The roof sagged. Ammunition popped in dull cracks from the heat. Somewhere to her left, a man was screaming for water, his throat raw, voice breaking. And yet she stayed still. Her rifle was slung across her back, useless now. Her hands trembled slightly, not from weakness but from restraint, because she had seen this before, too many times. Fire, smoke, the smell of flesh burning, and always, always brothers falling, slipping through her fingers. Her breath caught, and a memory slid in, uninvited. Another fire, another place. Another night when she was barely 20, still believing she could outrun nightmares. Her brother's hand in hers, younger than her by 3 years. A convoy ambushed, an explosion that ripped their world apart. She had dragged him into a ditch, pressed her palm against his chest, whispering that it was just a wound, just a scratch. He hadn't answered. His eyes were open, glassy, reflecting the same flames that licked around her now. She blinked hard. That night was gone, buried, or so she told herself. But here, this battlefield, it had pulled it back out, raw and merciless. A corporal stumbled toward her, clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. His voice cracked. "Lieutenant, orders." She turned, slow, deliberate, looked at him as though surfacing from somewhere far away. And in that moment, she wasn't sure what orders to give, because she was still wrestling with the truth that threatened to consume her. This was not just another mission. This was an echo of everything she had lost. "Hold the line," she finally said, her voice low, steady, too steady. She didn't trust herself to say more. He nodded, half believing, half desperate, and moved on. She stayed, watching, feeling the weight of every decision pressing down on her like an invisible hand around her throat. There was something no one here knew, something she had carried into this deployment, tucked away where no briefing could find it. She had sworn never to tell them, not her commander, not her unit, not even her closest friend in the platoon, because if she said it aloud, it would become real again. But silence is heavy, and silence sometimes is what kills more than bullets. She heard a laugh then, unexpected, harsh. A wounded sergeant coughing blood still managed to crack a joke to the medic working on him. It was absurd, wrong, and yet it was life clinging on in the middle of destruction. Her lips parted but no sound came. She envied that laugh, that fragile defiance. And still the fire spread. Her boots crunched on shattered glass as she finally moved, heading toward the edge of the smoke. The night air hit her face, cool compared to the furnace behind. She could see the horizon now, black hills silhouetted against the faint glow of distant flares. Somewhere out there, reinforcements were supposed to come. But would they? Her comms hissed with broken words, too much interference. She switched frequencies, static, nothing clear. It felt like they were cut off from the world, abandoned. And yet she couldn't let them see that in her eyes. She pulled the scarf tighter around her mouth, squinting through the haze. Her squad, what remained of it, was huddled in staggered lines, rifles ready but shoulders sagging. They looked to her, always to her. One of them, a young private barely shaving age, asked the question she feared. "Are we gonna make it out?" She didn't answer right away. She let the silence stretch heavy, because in silence sometimes you hear truth louder than words. Finally she said, "We will because we have to." It wasn't hope, it wasn't certainty, it was something harsher, a command not just to them but to herself. She turned away, scanning the dark again, and that's when she saw it: movement, shadows against shadows, too disciplined to be chance. Her pulse quickened, enemy advancing. She crouched, signaling with 2 fingers. The others tensed, shifting silently into firing positions. She could feel their fear radiating like heat. And in that crouch, heartbeat drumming in her ears, she whispered inside herself the thing she hadn't told them. The truth. "I'm not here to make it out." It sat there, cold, final. She wasn't fighting for her life. She was fighting for theirs. She had walked into this mission with that vow sealed in her bones. If it came down to it, she would carry them out, one by one, even if it meant leaving her own body behind in the smoke. Because she had failed once before, and she would not fail again. The shadows drew closer. She steadied her breathing. Her hands no longer trembled. The dam inside her cracked open, not into panic but into resolve. Her rifle slid into her hands with practiced ease. She pressed her cheek to the stock, eyes narrowing. Through the sight, the world shrank to one shape, one target. She squeezed. The crack echoed. A figure dropped. The silence after the shot was almost holy. She moved to the next, and the next. Each shot a rhythm, each recoil a beat against her chest. She became the smoke, the fire, the memory. She became the sister who had once failed, now rewriting that ending with every pull of the trigger. Her squad followed. Their rifles joined the chorus. The hillside sparked with muzzle flashes. Shadows scattered, but the fight was not over. not even close. And yet in that crucible she felt something shift. Not hope, not peace, but purpose, raw, unforgiving, and sharp. Because she knew now this was her war, not the one on the maps, not the one in the orders, but the one inside her. The flames roared louder behind, but her spirit burned brighter still. And when dawn threatened on the horizon, smeared and gray, she stood, smoke curling around her, rifle in hand, carrying not just brothers of blood but brothers of choice. What no one saw was the tear that cut down her cheek, vanishing into soot, a tear not of fear but of memory. The battle wasn't over, the night hadn't surrendered, but neither had she. Why was the silence heavier than the gunfire had been? The morning came slow, as if the sun itself hesitated to rise on this place. Ash drifted in the air like falling snow, coating everything in a pale, ghostly skin. The battlefield smelled of iron and smoke, of things that would never be washed clean. She sat on a broken wall, rifle across her knees, helmet pushed back. Her eyes weren't on the horizon. They were somewhere else, somewhere far inside. Around her the others moved quietly. No shouting now. No frantic scrambles, just the dull routine of survival, reloading magazines, wrapping bandages, counting heads, what was left of them. One voice broke through, shaky. "We lost 3. The number lingered in the air like a verdict. No one corrected it. No one added context. Everyone knew it wasn't just 3 bodies. It was 3 lives with stories unfinished. 3 seats at family tables now empty forever. She swallowed hard, forcing her face to stay still. But inside, it was a storm. She could feel the memory of every face she had lost in her career rising again, as though they had been waiting for this moment of quiet to slip back in. Her hands clenched the rifle tighter. A medic crouched beside her, eyes hollow but voice steady. "Lieutenant, you didn't sleep." She almost laughed. Sleep with what ghosts? Instead she just shook her head. Later. But there was no later, only now, and now felt endless. She pushed herself to stand, brushing the ash from her uniform. She scanned the landscape, every ruined wall, every shattered tree. Her eyes were sharp, hunting for movement, for danger. It was easier than looking at her squad's faces. And yet one face drew her in. The young private from last night, the one who had asked if they would make it. He was sitting apart from the others, helmet off, staring at the dirt in his hands, not crying, not speaking, just holding it like he was afraid to let go of something invisible. She walked over, quiet, stood near him, waiting. Finally he whispered, not looking up. "He was my best friend. He said we'd go home together. Now he's out there." His chin jerked toward the smoke where the dead still lay. She opened her mouth, searching for words. Comfort didn't come easy. Orders, yes. Commands, yes. But comfort, that was something she had lost the map to a long time ago. Still, she said softly, "He's not out there." The private frowned, confused. She tapped her chest, right over her heart. "He's here, that's where you carry him now." The boy nodded, though his eyes stayed wet. She knew it wasn't enough. Words never were. But sometimes a soldier just needed something to hold on to. She turned away before he could see the crack in her own expression. Because she was carrying her own ghosts. Too many. And they were heavier than any pack, heavier than any rifle. She wondered, not for the first time, how much longer she could keep carrying them without breaking under the weight. A radio hissed then, a voice, faint, broken but real. "Command to Echo Unit, do you copy?" Every head turned. Hope flickered like a match in wet hands. She grabbed the handset, pressing it tight to her ear. "Echo Unit, we copy, we're alive." Alive, the word tasted strange. Static answered first, then, "Hold position, reinforcements en route, ETA uncertain." Uncertain, that was just another way of saying, survive on your own. She closed her eyes, pressing the handset to her forehead for a moment. Then she gave the only answer that mattered. "Copy." The line went dead. Her squad looked at her, Waiting, always waiting. She set the radio down and straightened. We dig in, we hold until they come. It wasn't victory, it wasn't rescue, it was survival. They moved without protest, too tired for anything else. Some began stacking rubble into makeshift barriers. Others checked weapons. The medic returned to his wounded. It was routine, almost mechanical. The kind of work soldiers do not because they believe it will save them, but because doing nothing is worse. She joined them, hands raw from hauling stone, sweat streaking through soot on her face. She moved with purpose, but her mind was elsewhere. Because there was something she hadn't told them. Something she couldn't. This wasn't just another mission to her. This place, the hills, the ruined buildings, the burned-out convoy down the road, it was too familiar, too exact. She had been here before, years ago, when the fire had taken her brother. That was the secret she carried. And now, standing in the same soil, breathing the same ash, she knew this was not coincidence. She had volunteered for this deployment. She had chosen it, though no one asked why. She had come here to face the fire that had once swallowed her life whole. Not for revenge, not even for closure, but because some wounds don't heal in silence. They have to be walked into again and again until the pain burns into something else. She glanced at her squad, young faces, older scars, broken bodies still standing. They didn't know. They couldn't know. To them, she was just a leader, another officer giving orders. But inside, she was a sister who had come back to carry what she couldn't carry then. Her gaze drifted to the smoke again, and she thought, I failed once. I won't fail now. The day dragged on. Heat rose from the ground, shimmering. The world felt empty, like a stage after the play had ended, only the broken set pieces left behind. Now and then distant echoes reached them, gunfire, explosions, the low thud of artillery far away. The war was still alive, just not here, not yet. And in the waiting, time slowed. She sat with her back to the wall, helmet shading her eyes. For a moment, she let herself breathe, really breathe. She could hear her heartbeat, steady but heavy. She could hear the wind shifting the ash across the ground. And then, so faint she almost thought she imagined it, she heard singing. She lifted her head. One of the men, the sergeant who had joked while bleeding the night before, was humming a tune. Old, broken, but recognizable. Something about it cut through the silence sharper than any radio call. Others joined in, hesitant at first. A chorus of rough voices out of tune, cracked by exhaustion. But it was something, a thread binding them, fragile but real. She didn't join, she just listened. And for a moment it was enough. But her eyes stayed on the horizon, because she knew silence never lasted long. And sure enough, movement. Shadows again far off, slipping between trees, watching, waiting. She stood slowly, hand tightening on her rifle. The song faded as the others noticed her posture, weapons lifted, breath held. She whispered almost to herself, "It's not over." And deep inside, the fire that had haunted her for years flared again. But this time, she was ready to walk through it. Why did the dusk feel more dangerous than the night? The sun was sinking, dragging long shadows across the ruined hills. The light wasn't golden. It was rusted, sharp, and cruel, the kind of light that made every broken wall look like it was hiding something. The squad huddled low, eyes tracking every shift in the tree line. The air carried that waiting stillness soldiers learned to dread. She knelt behind the barricade, rifle resting across the cracked brick, breath measured. Her heartbeat was steady, but it was the steadiness of someone walking into inevitability. She had known this moment was coming. She could feel it in her bones. The first shot broke the silence. A whip of sound, then a spray of dust just inches from the young private's head. He flinched, dropping flat, cursing under his breath. She didn't flinch. Her scope snapped toward the tree line, a flicker, a muzzle flash. She fired, the shape fell. Another rose in its place. And then the hillside came alive. Gunfire rolled down in waves. sparks of muzzle flash blinking like fireflies in the dark. Bullets tore through their barricade, punching stone into shrapnel, sending men scrambling lower. The medic dragged one of the wounded into cover, teeth gritted, hands already slick with blood. Her voice cut through the chaos. "Hold your fire, aim, make every shot count." They did, they listened. Her words steadied them, gave them something to grip in the storm. Rifles answered the hillside, measured, deliberate, not wasted. Each crack was an act of defiance. But the enemy kept pressing, shadows multiplying, spreading wide, circling. Her eyes tracked them, calculating. They were outnumbered, outflanked, and they were running out of time. The private's voice broke, panicked. "Lieutenant, we can't hold this. We'll get overrun." She cut him off, sharp but calm. "You don't hold for victory, you hold for each other." It shut him up, but the fear in his eyes remained. Her gaze swept her squad. The sergeant, pale from blood loss, still firing one-handed. The medic, jaw set, ignoring the round that had grazed his arm. The private, shaking but steadying the barrel of his rifle with clenched fists. And then her eyes landed on the radio at her side. Silent, no word, no reinforcements, just empty static. She knew what that meant. She had always known. This was not a fight to win. This was a fight to carry. The thought of her brother came again, unbidden. His hand slipping from hers, the weight of a body she couldn't lift. The silence afterward, louder than any gunfire. That was the night she had been broken. That was the night she had sworn she would never let another fall where she couldn't carry them. And now here it was, the vow made flesh. A bullet cracked past her head, close enough to bite her ear. She ducked, exhaling slow. Her decision was already made. It had been made years ago in the fire and the smoke. But how do you tell your squad? How do you tell them you'll stay behind, that you'll buy their escape with your body, your life? You don't. You just act. She shifted, pulling the sergeant's shoulder down lower against the barricade. "You've got maybe 2 mags left," she muttered. "Make them count." He gave a dry laugh. "Always do." She glanced at the private. The boy's face was white, but his hands were steady now. She leaned close enough that he could hear her over the gunfire. "When I tell you to move, you don't argue. You run. You don't stop until you find the ridge." He opened his mouth. She saw the protest coming. She shut it down with a look. And then she turned back to the tree line. Shadows closing, fire growing. The world slowed. Every sound sharpened. Every detail etched into her mind. The grit beneath her palms, the metallic tang of smoke in her throat, the glow of muzzle flashes painting the trees. Her voice was steady. "On my mark, smoke out." Grenades arced. Clouds bloomed, white and thick, curling like ghosts between them and the advancing enemy. Confusion rippled through the tree line. Gunfire stuttered. She rose into it, rifle snapping, 3 shots, 3 shapes falling before she even took a breath. Her squad followed, pouring rounds into the smoke. And then she shouted, voice raw, "Move." They hesitated, just a heartbeat. Enough for her to see their eyes, to see the flicker of realization, the understanding that she wasn't moving with them. "Go," she roared, louder than the guns, louder than the fire. The private grabbed the medic, dragging him up. The sergeant stumbled with them, cursing, firing blindly into the haze. One by one they broke from cover, sprinting toward the ridge, toward the faint promise of survival. She stayed. Alone now, the barricade crumbling, the air burning. She rose fully, firing into the smoke until her rifle clicked dry. She dropped it, drew her sidearm, fired again. Her voice rose in a wordless cry, part rage, part grief, part something larger than both. She wasn't fighting for herself. She hadn't been since the moment she walked into this place. She was carrying them. Every step, every bullet, every breath. Carrying her squad, carrying her brother, carrying all the names etched into her memory like scars. The smoke thinned, shadows closed, her pistol emptied. She reached for her knife. And in that suspended moment, between dusk and dark, between fire and silence, she felt strangely light, as though the weight she had carried for years had finally shifted. Not gone, never gone, but shared, passed on. Because they would live, because she had made sure of it. And as the enemy pressed closer, she whispered, so soft no one could hear, I carried you this far, now carry me. Why do the last moments feel the slowest? The dusk was gone now, swallowed by full dark. Muzzle flashes lit the smoke in stuttering bursts. Each time she saw faces, hard, unfamiliar, closing in. The air was thick with powder, screams, the sharp crack of rifles. But her world had narrowed. It was no longer about numbers or tactics. It was about time, buying just enough. Her knife was slick in her palm. She moved with that grim clarity soldiers sometimes find when the choice is no longer survival but sacrifice. She slashed, she shoved, she fought in the blur of smoke. Bullets chewed the wall at her back, sparks leaping like fireflies. She was a silhouette in the chaos, one against many, and still she stood. Her mind flickered to them, her squad, her brothers. She pictured the privates stumbling up the ridge, lungs burning. The medic dragging the sergeant's half-limping body. Their breathless curses, their will to move, to live. That was enough. That was why she stayed. A round tore through her side. The breath left her in a hiss, but her knees did not buckle. She gritted her teeth, shoving it down, forcing her body forward. Every heartbeat now was a gift, every second a shield thrown across their backs. Another shot, another wound, heat spreading through her chest. Still she did not fall. She thought of her brother, eyes open, flames reflecting in them, her hands too weak to hold him here. That was the night she had promised herself she would never let go again. And now, here she was, promise kept. She stumbled, dropped to one knee. The world tilted, red bleeding into black. She forced her head up, forced her eyes open, so the last thing she saw was not the enemy, not the flames, but the path where her brothers had gone. And then silence. Not around her, the battle still raged, but inside. The storm inside her, after years of carrying, finally eased. Her body went still, but her spirit burned brighter than the flames. The survivors reached the ridge in pieces. The private collapsed first, chest heaving, face streaked with dirt and tears he didn't try to hide. The medic dropped beside him, dragging the sergeant until both lay gasping in the dirt. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was their breath and the faint roar of fire behind them. The private lifted his head, searching the smoke, the burning horizon. His voice cracked. She's still back there. The medic's hands froze where they pressed against the sergeant's bandage. His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They all knew. She told us to run, the sergeant rasped, eyes half closed but sharp with pain. So we ran. The boy shook his head. We can't just. You honor her, the sergeant cut him off, voice raw. You honor her by living, that's what she gave you, don't waste it. The words hit like bullets. The boy bent over, burying his face in his hands. The medic looked away, staring into the fire that was now eating the village whole. None of them said what they all felt. Guilt, gratitude, the unbearable weight of being carried out when someone else stayed behind. Dawn came again, slow, hesitant. The hills were quiet now, the smoke curling upward in tired spirals. The war had moved on to some other corner of the map, as wars always do. But for them, it stayed here. Reinforcements arrived at last, trucks, armored, soldiers fresh and clean. They found the survivors hollow-eyed, silent. They asked questions, counted heads, marked names. "Where's your lieutenant?" one asked. No one answered. The medic finally stood, shoulders straight despite exhaustion. His voice was flat, stripped of everything but truth. She carried us through. That was all. No details. No report could capture what had happened in that fire and that smoke. Some things weren't meant for paper. Some things lived only in memory. Weeks later, the private sat in a transport plane, eyes on the horizon as the land fell away beneath them. He carried his helmet in his lap, fingers tracing the scratches on its surface. He hadn't spoken much since, but in the quiet of the plane he whispered, not a prayer, not exactly, more like a promise. "I'll carry you now." And somewhere in the silence beyond fire and smoke, perhaps she heard. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And sometimes the brightest spirit is the one that burns quietly, carrying others through the flames, until the fire no longer matters. The screen fades to black, silence lingers. Not an ending, a carrying.